Something is manipulating you right now, and you have no idea. It's not a person, at least not directly. It's not an invisible hand theatrically pulling the strings. It's something much subtler, more sinister. It's in the words you hear every day, in the silences you don't question, in the excuses you accept without thinking. It hides in the phrases that make you doubt yourself, that force you to justify feeling, thinking, being. You don't see it, but you feel it. A sensation that something is wrong, even if you can't explain what. Like your thoughts aren't completely your own. Like every decision passes through a filter you don't remember installing. That is manipulation. Not the exaggerated spectacle they show you in the movies. Not the villain with the evil face. Not direct blackmail. It's the voice that says, "Don't you think you're overreacting?" Just when you finally dare to speak. It's the "I just want to help you" that comes after emotionally tearing you apart. It's the "if you really loved me" that turns love into an emotional trap. And the most unsettling part is this. You accept it, because they have camouflaged it so well that you no longer see it as violence, but as part of love, friendship, commitment. Do you feel it? That discomfort that sticks with you when you remember certain conversations. That moment you stayed silent because somehow you started to believe it was your fault. The problem is, no one taught you to identify these signs. No one told you that language is a weapon, that some words, launched precisely, don't seek to communicate, but to dominate, to control. And Carl Jung knew this. Jung understood that language has the power to shape perception, that a phrase, said a certain way, can be implanted in your unconscious like a silent seed, that manipulators don't need to shout to control you, they just need to know which button to press. And there are phrases, specific phrases, that act as keys to access your mind without permission. Phrases repeated, almost always with the same words, the same calm, almost kind tone. Phrases that seem harmless but carry poison. And maybe you've already heard them. Maybe today, maybe yesterday, maybe your whole life. And you never noticed. Because here comes the blow. Manipulators are not recognized by their attitude but by their language. And if you don't understand how they speak, if you don't learn to decipher the code, you'll end up believing the problem is you. Manipulation doesn't start with a scream, it starts with a doubt, with that voice that says, "What if they're right?" With that moment when you stop trusting your intuition because someone else convinced you that you are broken. And you're not. You're just trapped in a game where the rules are made for you to lose and be grateful for having played. This video is a break, a cut, a conscious scar in the invisible structure that has kept you subdued without visible chains. Today we're going to tear that veil. We're going to look directly at the hidden mechanisms. And we won't do it with moralizing, positive phrases, or prefab solutions. We're going to do it from the darkest place, from where true control is born. Language. Today, you're going to learn to detect a manipulator without them needing to shout, insult you, or push you. You'll see it in what they say, how they say it, and what you feel afterward. Because there lies the trap, not in their words, but in how those words alter your perception. Have you ever wondered why you felt guilty after telling your truth? Why you regretted setting boundaries? Why you felt like you were the one who had to apologize even when you knew you had been hurt? It wasn't by chance. It was language, it was manipulation, it was psychological design, and right now someone might be doing it to you. Maybe they've already planted phrases you repeat as your own. Phrases like, "It's just that I'm very sensitive. I'm probably exaggerating. I always ruin everything." Do you really think you came to those conclusions alone? Or did someone whisper them so many times they ended up sounding like your inner voice? Today, You're going to understand how they reprogrammed you, how they took your emotions, your doubts, your wounds, and used them against you. And most importantly, you're going to learn to detect the 5 phrases that are real emotional bombs disguised as everyday conversation. Not because those phrases are magical, but because they're built to operate in the most vulnerable area of your mind, your need for approval. Jung explained it with brutal clarity. Manipulators project onto others what they cannot accept about themselves, and they do it with such skill that you end up carrying the guilt that belongs to them. And here's the disturbing part. They don't only do it consciously. Some do, of course, but others are simply repeating a pattern. One they learned in childhood, one they used to survive. But now they use it on you. That doesn't make them innocent, but it makes them dangerous. Because they believe what they do is right, that it's normal, that it's love, and you, if you're not awake, fall, because you confuse their trauma with your responsibility. And that's a burden that doesn't belong to you. Now, listen carefully. If you've ever thought, maybe I'm the problem, there's a high chance someone has been manipulating your perception. Because the manipulator doesn't seek solutions, they seek domination. They don't want to talk with you, they want to be right. They don't want to understand you, they want to win. And if they feel they're losing control, they punish you with distance, with guilt, with phrases like, "You disappoint me," or "I expected more from you." Those are phrases designed to make you feel like you've failed them. But in reality, you just stopped obeying. And here comes another level of the game. When you decide to leave, when you decide to set a boundary, the rescue phase begins. They show affection again. They tell you how important you are. They promise they're going to change. And you, hungry for love, fall. Because what you don't understand at that moment is that this is not a real change. It's a survival tactic. The manipulator feels like they're losing control and will do whatever it takes to regain it, even pretend, even cry, even make you feel like you're the one abandoning something valuable. And it's not true. The only thing you're leaving behind is the emotional prison they put you in, without bars, but with many words. And here is where the real work begins. Not only recognizing the phrases, but dismantling the emotional structure built upon them. Because maybe now they don't say those phrases anymore. Maybe now you're the one repeating them to yourself. I shouldn't feel this way. I'm exaggerating again. It's probably my fault. That's the echo of manipulation. That's what remains when the person is gone. But the damage stays. And that's where you have to intervene. Because if you don't cut that loop, you become your own manipulator. You take on guilt that was never yours. And you keep repeating the same patterns, only now with yourself. And here's the most brutal thing you'll hear today. If you don't clear your mind of these phrases, you will end up repeating the same game with other people, with your children, with your partners, with your friends, because what isn't healed gets transmitted. And if you were manipulated but don't do the work to break that pattern, there's a big chance you'll end up manipulating, even if you don't notice it. Even if you think you're just saying things for their own good. Language is a virus, and if you don't detect it, it spreads. It transforms you. It possesses you. That's why this video is not just a denunciation, it's a warning, a mirror, an alarm ringing in the middle of the night. Because now that you know all this, you can't go back to being blind. You can't keep calling love what is control. You can't keep justifying the unjustifiable. Because if you do, you'll be perpetuating the cycle. You'll be part of the problem. And you're not here for that. You're here to wake up, to break the chain, to clear your mind and reclaim something that belongs to you. Your truth, your voice, your judgment, your emotional freedom. And that, my friend, starts with one thing. Stop justifying what hurts you. Because what really hurts doesn't get rationalized. It gets listened to, it gets respected, and it gets defended. And when you finally stop justifying what hurts, something extraordinary happens. Silence changes. It's no longer that uncomfortable void they used against you. It becomes your territory, sacred space, the place where reconstruction begins. But rebuilding isn't going back to who you were before. It's creating a new version, with visible scars but sharp vision. Because once you've seen the real face of manipulation, you're never the same again. You can't be. And here's something few people tell you. After leaving a manipulative relationship, you don't just have to heal, you have to learn to live without the echo. Because the manipulator doesn't just teach you to depend on them, they teach you to depend on conflict, chaos, constant imbalance, and that's addictive. Yes, like a drug, because your body gets used to being on alert, living with a knot in your stomach, interpreting every gesture, every pause, every tone. You become an expert at reading signals. And when there are no signals, you get lost. You don't know how to be at peace. You don't know how to trust simplicity. It feels suspicious, boring, unsafe. And then, without realizing it, you try to recreate the pattern. You enter new relationships where you justify the unjustifiable again. You cling to people who give you scraps because you confused love with waiting. Because you grew up believing that loving meant enduring, that being strong meant holding on. And it's not like that. Being strong isn't resisting at all costs. It's knowing when to let go before you break completely. And here comes another brutal point. Manipulation also has physical effects. It doesn't stay only emotional. Your body starts to speak. Insomnia, anxiety, chest pain, a lump in your throat, constant fatigue. These aren't random signals. They are messages. Your body is trying to tell you what your mind has learned to silence. It tries to shake you, to wake you up. Because when someone plays with your perception, it also affects your nervous system. It's not just another argument, it's an invasion, an emotional attack that leaves real marks. Because yes, gaslighting doesn't just alter what you think. It alters how you breathe, how you sleep, how you eat, how you talk to yourself. And if you don't pay attention, you get used to living like this. Tense, on alert, afraid to say what you think. Afraid everything will explode if you take one wrong step. And when you live like this long enough, the abnormal becomes the norm. You start saying, "That's just how I am." But no, that's not how you were. That's how they made you. Because no one is born distrusting their emotions. No one is born questioning themselves every moment. That's learned. That was induced. And now it's time to unlearn it. But that, as I told you, isn't easy. Because here comes another paradox of this game. There's a part of you that clings to the manipulator, that remembers them with nostalgia, that looks for them in songs, in memories, in patterns, because the manipulator, even though they hurt you, also filled a void. At least for a time, at least apparently, and that creates a distorted attachment. You know it, you hate it, but also deep down, you miss it. And that doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Because humans don't only attach to the good, they attach to what is familiar, even if it's destroying them. And here is where the wound becomes a lesson. When you stop romanticizing suffering, when you realize you deserve relationships where you don't have to defend yourself, where there are no games, where love doesn't hurt. Because true love isn't perfect, but it also doesn't leave you bleeding every day. Love doesn't have to hurt to be real. That's a myth they sold us. What hurts is attachment to pain, addiction to drama, the need to be saved by someone who sinks you a little deeper every time they reach out a hand. And now, listen carefully. There is something even subtler than manipulative phrases, subtler than emotional blackmail. And it's conditional praise. Yes, because the manipulator also knows how to flatter. But their compliments always have a trap. They don't say, "You're amazing." They say, "You're amazing when you do what I expect from you." They don't say, "I like you as you are." They say, "I like you when you don't complicate things so much." Praise becomes a golden cage, because they reward you only when you obey, only when you adapt. And you, hungry for approval, learn to please to get scraps. And that's not love. It's training. It's emotional domestication. And then you realize something else. The true act of rebellion is not shouting at the manipulator. It's never needing their approval again. It's stopping looking for their validation. It's telling yourself what you wished they would tell you, because that's where true freedom begins. Not when the other changes, not when they apologize, but when you no longer depend on their gaze to define your worth. When you can say, "I don't need you to understand me to know I'm right about how I feel." That is the phrase that breaks the chain. And beware, don't confuse this with arrogance. It's not blind pride, it's emotional autonomy. It's understanding that you're not obligated to justify every emotion. That feeling is not a mistake. That having boundaries is not selfishness. That asking for respect is not being difficult. It's basic. It's human. And if someone makes you feel guilty for that, they don't love you, they're using you. And then comes the last step. The moment you realize you're no longer manipulable, because you no longer seek approval, but respect. Because you no longer tolerate what you used to keep silent about. Because you no longer lower your head to preserve broken bonds. Because you've understood something that changes everything. Love that demands your silence isn't love, it's submission in disguise. And you weren't born to bow your head. You were born to look straight ahead even when you tremble. To speak even when your voice breaks. To say enough without giving explanations. Because at the end of the day, what saves you isn't someone understanding you. It's that you finally understand yourself. And just when you think you've understood everything, one last layer appears. The quietest, the most treacherous. And it's not in the manipulator's voice, not even in your internal dialogue. It's in society, in the collective narrative that normalizes control disguised as love. Have you noticed? They taught us to distrust those who impose themselves, but to blindly trust those who victimize themselves. They programmed us to fear shouting, but not the poisonous whisper. They educated us with phrases like, "Those who love you well will make you cry," or "You have to know how to give in for love." And so, unintentionally, you became the perfect target for emotional manipulation. Because since childhood, they made you believe suffering was part of connection. That loving meant giving in, and giving in until you forget yourself. But listen to me. Love doesn't have to hurt to be true. You don't have to crawl to be loved. You don't have to become a reduced version of yourself to fit someone else's mold. Real love doesn't seek to crush you. It seeks to see you grow. And if it doesn't, it's not love. It's dependence. And if it hurts you more than it builds you, then it's not embracing you. It's consuming you. Here is where the door opens that almost no one crosses: lucid self-love. Not the self-love of pretty phrases, mirror affirmations, self-help books with fluorescent titles. I'm talking about the self-love that makes you uncomfortable, the one that forces you to close doors, to face loneliness, to disappoint others' expectations, to break bonds you once believed eternal. That is the true act of love. Stopping betraying yourself to keep others happy. Because every time you stay silent not to bother, you're abandoning yourself. Every time you endure the unbearable, you're reinforcing your own cage. And if there's one thing Jung made clear, it's that you can't become who you're meant to be if you live acting a character written by others. So now, right this moment, I want you to pause for a second. Breathe. And ask yourself, how many times have you become an accomplice of your own manipulation? How many times did you know something was wrong, but decided to look the other way? Not to protect the other person, but because you didn't feel strong enough to hold your truth. And that's not cowardice, it's fear. But fear can be trained. You face it. You walk with it. And that's the final point of this video. Manipulation doesn't end when the other person leaves. It ends when you decide never to give yourself again to anyone who doesn't know how to treat your vulnerability as something sacred. When you understand that real love is not begged for, nor negotiated at the cost of your peace, it is lived, it is built with respect, with honesty, and with truth. If you've made it this far, it means something inside you has already begun to change. You're no longer blind. You're no longer easy prey. You've recovered something they took without you noticing. Clarity. And believe me, no one can take that from you again. Now I want to propose something. It's not an empty call to action. It's a way to leave an invisible but powerful mark. If this video stirred you, if it made you see things you didn't want to see, leave me a phrase in the comments. Language will not dominate me. Let the world see it. Let others in the dark know there is a way out, that there are people who have already opened their eyes. And if you're not ready to write it yet, that's okay. Keep this phrase for yourself. But don't forget it, because when you hear one of those manipulative phrases again, you'll need it as a shield. Subscribe if you want to keep unmasking the shadows of the human mind. We're not here to entertain you. We're here to make you uncomfortable until you wake up. Every video is another crack in that mask you've been wearing for years. And believe me, the version of you behind that mask is much more dangerous than you think. Now then, I leave you with this last image. Imagine being in a room full of people, all talking, all giving opinions, all trying to tell you who you should be. And suddenly, in the middle of the noise, you turn around, cover your ears, and walk in the opposite direction, without looking back, without asking for permission, without giving explanations. That is you from now on. That is you when you finally decide to be free. See you in the next video. Or not. Maybe you don't need someone to tell you anymore.